It likes a lot of plants. It will feed on a lot of plants. Apparently, it only reproduced well on a couple, but it is suspect in that we think it's going to cause us problems in apples and grapes and fruit production and that sort of thing. We already have some information about grapes with some, 80, 90% yield loss, and that's not necessarily from direct feeding, but it's largely because this insect makes a lot of poo and gets all over the grapes. They're unusable. We had a person in the entomology department from Penn State, Heather Leach, talking about the issue with apples being covered in honeydew. Well, yeah, I'm watching on it. There's a lot of activity still happening here, and it's distracting. So anyway, I can only focus on one thing at a time. It's messes me up. And so, this always does too, because I don't know which way to look, and need one back here. And so, I'll stand back here and then I can look. So we are interested in this because of the potential for being an ag pest. Largely we find them in these areas I've been to near great vineyards, and the insect produces a lot of honeydew, and honeydew, of course, makes sooty mold, or sooty mold grows on honeydew, and that makes the grapes unusable. I won't even eat them, let alone make wine out of them. It's got a favorite food, the tree of heaven. This is an interesting critter too. You see them growing out the Holland Tunnel or growing off the Walt Whitman Bridge, I guess, I'm in South Jersey, and they grow in crafts and they grow virtually anywhere. And now we've got something that likes to eat it, and I don't know if it's tree biocontrol or we're going to have to cut down a lot of these trees or eliminate them in the process of trying to manage this. I always thought these were kind of small and meaty. I went with the Avis PPQ folks into the woods and saw big ones, and that was something that I learned. It's a revelation to me. I had no idea, and so there's a lot more of these that once you just, it's like, to decide you like a certain kind of car, and then everywhere you look, that same car keeps popping up. Once I realized there was big ones, I see them all over the place now, and so it's an issue. So we have a quarantine in Pennsylvania, of course, around the, and I'll get to the New Jersey stuff in a minute, but it continues to grow. I guess the westernmost county, Dauphin County, has been added to this list this year. Interestingly enough, this morning after I put this together, I figured I better read something about this. And I saw a paper that was published in the Journal of Economic Entomology that predicted where this insect might go. And essentially, it's going to go west from Pennsylvania, and it sort of stops when it hits Kansas, right? Based on weather data in the area where it's indigenous, in China, and the weather data here in the United States. So we're looking at, kind of along the same latitude line west, St. Louis and Kansas City, and that sort of thing. So we suspect it's going to move. Of course, we're right next door. It's going to move toward us. And adults are large insects. They're inch and a half in length. They generally stand up and hold their wings in a tent, like over the body. They are, the head's supposed to look like a lantern. You read descriptions of it in the literature. It says the head looks like a lantern. The wings, of course, are spotted. If you get up close, they have a kind of a brick or a clay-like coloration. It looks like they're stacked bricks. The wing veins are these stacked bricks. And they're supposed to blow, right? Because the hind wing is red, right? So it'll show through, and so they glow like a lantern. I think the next slide shows a little bit better. And they glow a little bit. The abdomen's yellow, and again, these are large insects that when you see them, they're quite striking, because when you see, I've been in areas where there's a few, but yesterday I talked to a golf course superintendent in Pennsylvania, and he started showing me pictures, and it's not just a few, it's a whole bunch, man, and like thousands of them. I mentioned Heather Leach already. If you guys are on Twitter, Try to find Heather Leach on Twitter because she posts pictures of like downtown Allentown with literally thousands of them on the street. You know, so that's going to be kind of an issue too. If you talk about nuisance pests, this is going to be one of them. So overwinters eggs. You know, in the spring, April to May, the eggs start to hatch, and you have 4 larval instars that work their way toward. Can't read my slides, so I'll put on my old man glasses. And I got a prescription for these things, and I was looking at the eye doctor thinking, why do you want me to spend $300 on glasses I can get for 10 at Target? And so I went to Target, and I wanted to see the time, July to September. You know, so look, these things are not going to all hatch and come out at once. So if your eggs are hatched in April to May, it's going to take some time. So late summer, you know, before we start seeing the adult phase, and then we see the adults through frost. You know, they're surviving now. They're hopping around now. They're mating, laying eggs now, and they have been September, you know, October, and it's not November yet. Next week, and they'll continue to do so. One generation a year. They are quite prolific. This is what you call a rabid female here. She's swelled up. You can see her yellow abdomen. And she's swelled up. She's about ready to lay eggs. Took that picture, or Sabrina did. You know, I think it was September last year. And so they lay eggs, usually 30 to 50 at a time, and they're covered with a waxy coating, like a wax. And the wax apparently has to wear off over the winter for the eggs to start hatching, right? So this is a protective coating. They'll lay eggs on virtually anything, right? And so that's the problem. If you're in the quarantine zones where there's high populations of these things, they're going to lay eggs on your Starcraft camper, and you're going to drive home to St. Louis, or well, no, you're going to drive home to here. And I think she just went camping across the river, but you know, you're going to carry it with you. And that's the issue with this thing. When I talked to Rosa and Paul Kurtz and those folks in the meetings, you know, they were saying they found them in Atlantic City almost every day. You know, because the adults are moving on the cars across the Atlantic City Expressway from the quarantine zones. You know, and the eggs are going to be on, you know, any kind of commerce and commercial vehicles and that sort of stuff. And so these things are going to spread because of us more than anything else. You know, they don't really fly that far. They kind of hop when you see them. You know, 8, 10 feet. They hop all over you. It's kind of cool. And again, they lay eggs and in masses on virtually anything. Now, they prefer to lay their eggs, of course, on Atlantis, and they need to feed on Atlantis before they actually start to lay eggs. So I think that still holds up. We think anyway. Maybe black walnuts too. Right. There's, you know, these things apparently are toxic or they taste bad. They taste bad. And at one point they thought it was the same compound in this insect that was in blister beetles. And you ever pick up a blister beetle and get a little caustic problem in your hands? You know, it'll squirt some body fluid on you, and it's low pH, and it'll burn it. And apparently that has been disproven, but they're not sure what it is in them that makes them taste bad. But we think it comes from the trees, right? It comes from the trees. So you know, to complete their life cycle, they need to feed on tree heaven. Some research reports I read, black walnut, they'll do it too. We all know black walnut has chemicals that are problematic for the plants around them. So again, you know, ongoing research. But the moral of the story right now is don't eat them. You probably won't like them, right? So, yeah. I don't know. I'll come to that. That's a good question. In fact, that's like the last slide, man. You know. So the eggs are generally laid in rows. They're elongate, right? You can see them on the penny there. And again, they're covered with this waxy coating. they can lay a lot of them, right? I got this off of Twitter, and you know, I use Twitter for science and stuff, and Grateful Dead, but you got to keep deleting the politics stuff. And they lay a lot of eggs on any surface, and there's a massive amount of potential offspring there. The eggs hatch, and they have elongate exit holes from the eggs, right? So there are some wasp predators of these things. So starting to kind of get toward that, is the fungus going to help us? We have some wasps that they're rearing them now at the Beneficial Insect Research Lab at the University of Delaware that they found in China. And so if you're looking at populations of empty eggs, if you see a lot of round holes, you know, there's a parasitoid or a parasite there. You know, it's always good to know your good guys before you make a spray decision. You know, and so, you know, right now I'm thinking hammer on, but in the future, in an integrated pest management program, we're going to have to start looking for the predators and prey and that sort of stuff, and kind of taking that into consideration for our control decisions. Okay, so the eggs hatch in the spring, and again, there's 4 nymphal instars. The first 3 have black and white spots, right? So, and these things crawl. They crawl pretty well. They'll crawl across the ground. Right, they're pretty mobile. I've talked to guys saying, why can't we just spray Talstar on the grass while they're walking around? And I thought to myself, I won't tell if you do, but why can't we? You can mow them up too, you know, and get your mower out and take care of them. And so, so the 4th instar ultimately turns red. So it's they crawl or jump, they move around, and then we have the red ones, right? And so it's an attractive looking insect, gradual metamorphosis, and eventually they'll molt into the adults. And the adults will feed by sticking their stylet, and you can see the bottom of one. It's a pretty robust stylet on this thing because it's a wood feeder, you know, as opposed to a succulent or a green tissue feeder. And so they feed in the woody tissue. They don't feed on the fruit. You're not going to see them on the foliage, and they suck phloem sap. Now that's you know, if
I've seen them on the peduncle of the flowers. The flowers are gone, all that's left is the stems. And I've seen adults feed on them.
oh, they feed on that too. Cool. See, I got to think about what I'm saying because there's people here that know what I'm talking about. Right. So, you know, I'm always going, I wonder if this is right, I wonder if this is right. And, because, you know, I'm just thinking, cool. You know, I don't want to read the signs, I just want to squish them, you know. And so, you know, look, listen, if you eat phloem fluid for a living, you know, that's not necessarily all that nutritious. So that it's like drinking beer, like for your sustenance. And I'm looking around the room, I see people who do that. And so you know, the more beer you drink to get that carbohydrate, the more you got to pee, right? And so these things are like giant pumps that pump phloem fluid into the body and out the back. And that honeydew gets on anything. It's like an aphid on steroids. The amount of guys have described to me that it sounds like it's raining underneath the trees that are filled with it. And the clouds will come, and you know, the transpiration demand wanes a little bit, and it stops. And then the sun comes out, and it sounds like it's raining again. You know, completely opposite. So that, I think, is going to be the main problem. So the honeydew gets on everything. It gets all over everything. I can hear it now. You know, people, if you're like a tree guy, you know, you're going to have folks calling you up and saying, you know, this thing's pooing all over my car, and it's all over the deck, and it's all over the backyard, and we're having a wedding, and we can't, you know, I remember when the cicadas came out. People in Princeton, like, we're having a wedding, it's so noisy, we got to kill them all. And it's like, there's 10 million of them, I don't know what you're going to do, you know, go inside, you know, play the Grateful Dead loud. And so the phenomenon we've seen is a lot of bee activity, a lot of yellow jackets, a lot of ants harvesting that. And even late into the season, after after the frost, yellow jackets, we find them still in the woods. And when you have all that honeydew, you get sooty mold, and that it's abundant. And again, it's just another aesthetic issue that we have to deal with, right? And so these things, there's lots of them. There's never just a couple. I like coming to some of these pictures of just thousands of them all over the place. I mean, I can't wait. I don't know how we're going to stop it. And so that kind of brings me to this. I mean, so here's the quarantine maps. You can see that the eastern or the western part of New Jersey, the counties along the river are in the quarantine zone. We have areas in Delaware, northern Delaware, in Pennsylvania. We have areas where we found them and they aren't established yet. You see all the yellow. Again, if you look at the most recent journal articles that are predicting the population spread, you're basically looking at a swath west through Pennsylvania, out to Kansas, right? So again, it's insects mobile, I know that there's infestations outside the quarantine zone already. I mean, I had guys that were in a golf tournament a couple of days ago sending me pictures, and it's in a county outside of the blue, right? So it's we have them on campus at Rutgers too. So again, that's not in the blue. And so these things are spreading, slowly. 2014, you're looking at 5 years, how much it's grown. Another 5 years, I would say they're everywhere in the state. We've been working, my guys have been working with, this is when we went to the quarantine zone. You can see that it was not me that took this photograph. And so we were walking toward a quarantine site, and on the way we found some where they weren't supposed to be. So again, there are a lot more of them out there than I think we know. And the point here is working with the State Department of Ag and the APHIS PPQ folks, and we have a little bit to do with it. We were really, I was just there for fun, but I wanted to see what was going on. How are these folks trying to contain this? And so what they would do is, and correct me if I'm not explaining this right, but what they would do is they go find all the ailanthus, and they mark them. They paint them with blue paint, right? And they mark them on with a GPS. And so you have this map of all the trees, right? And they're painted blue or red, right? Okay, blue gets garlic. Yeah. So you're thinking about this in a wooded area, and you're trying to find saplings and smaller trees and larger trees, and they're painting them blue. And the ones that have infestations, they're painting them red. And you're trying to find all these trees, and there's all these walnuts all around, and I'm looking around going, how do you know which one's which? And so then we bring in contractors, and these guys essentially have machetes and bottles of dinotephuran and garlic, and some of them have glyphosate, right? And so what they do is they find and they spray the small ones with glyphosate or Garlon. They go to the bigger trees, and they hack the bigger trees and spray them with Garlon, right? And that's kill the trees. And Saul or someone from APHIS is down there watching them with the map. And these guys are all over the place with machetes and killing stuff and causing havoc of all sorts. And the whole time there, I'm thinking this seems like it's an exercise in futility, because how do you know where all these trees are? How are you going to find them all and find these insects, particularly in wooded areas? So they're doing their best to knock them down, and some of the trees are getting sprayed with dinotephuran, and what they wind up doing is trying to kill all the female trees and saving a couple of male trees as trap trees, right? You don't want to save a female tree because the female tree is going to make more trees, right? So we saved a couple of males, right? And so the males wind up getting sticky tape around them, right? And then we can come back and treat those trees and kill them, or monitor the populations, or stick them to the tape and that sort of thing. So again, it's an ongoing process, of hunt for the tree, kill the tree, spray the tree, mark the tree, that sort of thing. And you know, I guess it slows it down. You know, I'm not sure we can eradicate it. Now, as far as insecticides are concerned, if you look in the literature, there's several materials that are labeled or, you know, recommended for this. You know, check your labels before you start spraying. But dinotecturan or safari, what's the other, Xylam or something, is the material of choice because we can control the application, right? You can either inject it into the tree or you can spray it on the trunk, as opposed to taking some bifenthrin and squirting it out of fire hose or whatever, you know, high pressure nozzle. You know what I'm saying? That'll get you locked up in New Jersey. So somebody will be mad at you. So a lot of pop, you know, they're easy to kill. You know, that's the good news. You know, they're out there in the open. You know, you can hit them with a contact material like Provant down there on the bottom. It'll knock them down, right? But again, there's going to be a lot of them, so you're going to spray it a lot. So what else do we have here? We have quarantine zones, right? So respect the quarantine zone. Inspect your stuff moving in and out of the quarantine zone. I have a list here coming up in a couple slides of things that you should be looking at. And use the sticky tree bands. Apparently the brown ones work better than the yellow ones, from what, I don't know if that's true. I read that and I thought, okay, look for overwintering egg masses. And I think that's something that everybody here can do, and the folks in your townships or wherever you're from might be able to do, is scrape egg masses, right? And they had a count in Pennsylvania at one point, you know, a couple of years ago, it was 1.5 million, you know, scraped. You know, the other thing is teach people to squish them, right? See and kill it, and hopefully we can reduce the amount of spread or slow it down a little bit. A lot of times, what we're trying to do on the front of these infestations is just slow it down, you know, or contain it as much as we can for the time being. Also recognize that if you put your egg masses or scrape them off and they're on the ground, they might live, and so scrape them into a bag or into alcohol or something like that, right? So there's a bunch of stuff regulating the quarantine zone that you're not supposed to move or move out without inspection, and recognize that's about everything you can think of putting in the back of your pickup truck. You need to make sure that there's no egg masses on them. You know, again, it seems like a lot of effort, but if we can slow down or reduce the amount of spread of this thing, that's a good thing. You know, you can't take your grill down to see the Eagles because, you know, we don't want. I was going to say something negative about the Eagles, but I'm an Eagles fan and I'm just disappointed right now. You know, that the other night was a tough thing to swallow. And so, anyway, but be careful. Be careful with what you're moving and what you're moving. And there's a checklist. We kind of let Penn State lead on some of this stuff. And if you get the checklist, you go down the checklist, and you can, I always like checklists because it reminds me of what to do. You know, otherwise I'm just kind of looking and not really thinking about it. So it makes you mindful of what's going on. Here's the sticky bands, and again, I like these pictures because it looks like the yellow one works better than the brown one in this set pair of photos. But the folks I've talked to say the brown ones work better. Now this kind of comes to this, right? So we recognize that we found native infestations of these things with parasitic fungi, entomopathogenic fungi, Bovaria bassiana. Now, recognize that there is a commercial formulation of Bovaria bassiana that you can actually spray. We've been messing with it in turf grass for chinch bugs and stuff. It kills chinch bugs really well. And not when we spray it. Natural infestations, hammer. But we've been messing around with it in turf grass for a long time folks in greenhouses use it because it's a controlled environment. I think the biocontrols always work better in a sterile environment, you know, that's spread in nature. But there's folks at Cornell looking at these fungi and trying to use the commercially available products to see if we can kill, you know, that's economic, you know, that's that sort of thing. There's a guy in West Virginia, Matt Casson, who looks at all types of fungi like this. And so again, there's a bunch of researchers looking for this kind of a solution. And what I'm thinking is, you know, and again, this is pure speculation for me, but when we have gypsy moths, right, we have outbreaks of gypsy moth that are usually checked by entomopathogenic fungi after a couple of years as the populations of gypsy moth comes up. And so I'm wondering if this, after the initial wave and the big epidemic for the first 10 years or so, is going to turn into a gypsy moth kind of thing, where we have them, they come up and they surge for a couple of years, and then the native fungi take them out, and then they come back. And, you know, I think with gypsy moths, it's like 8 or 10 year cycles, right? So again, it's just me like thinking out loud, but there's potential here from a commercial application standpoint, and then let nature take over and take care of it. So is that a good enough answer? Yeah, right. We're hoping for a Pest. You know, I got to tell you, we're talking about this. That guy in West Virginia found a fungus in cicadas, right? And this fungus in cicadas is the only fungus that's not it's an ascomycete. It's not a fleshy fungus, the mushroom that makes psilocybin, right? And psilocybin is a hallucinogenic chemical. That's when you eat the mushrooms and you get happy. And so this fungus in the cicada makes psilocybin. It also makes methamphetamine, right? And so the male cicadas that are infected with this fungus mate like crazy, right? Because they're tripping and they're on speed and they're chasing all the females. And right? It's nutty, you know. I don't know how we found out, but yeah, don't eat one, right? And so, but yeah, so that's how it gets the males to mate. So I mean, their abdomens have fallen off, and they're still mating, trying to mate, and they spread the fungus that way, and so it works real well. So you know, careful at the Grateful Dead concert. So so again, so what are you going to do? Scrape egg masses during the winter, inspect your stuff, squish them if you see them, use bands, you know, eliminate the female Alanthus if you can, and then you have opportunities to kill them, you know, from May through now. You know, kill them before they lay eggs for next year. You know, kill the babies. They use less insecticide. So again, this is just on the Penn State Extension website. Penn State has a lot of nice resources. So you know, just get in there and if you find them, we want to know. George Hamilton says you said, you know, let the Rutgers has a website. State Department of Ag has a website. You know, I think it's cool, but don't call me. Call Paul Kurtz or something.
Certain counties, like Hunterdon County, they don't even want to know.
They don't even want to know anymore. You know, with those dumb stink bugs, man, people were emailing me all the time about those stink bugs, and I just started to go delete. You know, yeah, I don't want to know. But we want to know, but you know it's here, and like it's here, and we're just going to see more of it, as with my impression. But again, we kind of like to track this sort of stuff. So help us track it if we can. All right, good. Yes.
You mentioned for you guys that are working in the quarantine area, out of the area, you are required to have a permit. They're free right now. They do it soon. They have opportunity. I don't know whether it will be live within 2 hours going to the United States. I suggest doing it sooner than later. This reminds same training, same permit. But if you're moving material in and out of the quarantine, you are required to have a permit.
Good advice.
Now, we're in here, transferring over, if you use it to New Jersey, Department of Agricultural website, half an hour, it's available under the 2 hour training.
So get your permits if you're moving stuff in and out of the quarantine zone. Question? Yeah, you.
Is there an easy way to tell a female from a male tree of heaven when they're little?
That's a good question, and you should ask an arborist. The quick answer is no. See, I went to college, and all I ever took was like how to identify fungi and insects. Nobody ever taught me how to ID trees and stuff. Yeah, I had to learn that on my own. And so I hired my assistant that knew. So I hired somebody that knew. Yeah. So I go, I think this is this. What do you think? And after all these years, I know, but I don't. And so here's one I put in this morning because Marjorie Daughtry up at Cornell, she mailed me a sample yesterday and she told me today that it was coming so I could see it. Right, so I think we have some, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, it coming in the mail to my lab. We'll autoclave it after we're finished. So this is this thing called beech leaf disease, and it's I don't even know what to say. It's a new disease, and of uncertain cause. Now I have a cause up there. It's a nematode, and they've discovered a nematode in beech in Japan, and they described it, and they found this nematode in some of the trees, here in the United States. They first started recognizing this as a problem in Ohio, in 2012. I've seen a lot of pictures. We had folks from our landscape architect on a field trip in Ohio sending me pictures. What is this? What is this? I don't know what it is. I've never seen it. And so it's both American and European beech, and the epicenter, I guess, is in Ontario, around the Great Lakes there in Ohio, and northwest Pennsylvania. Right. So this is where it's confirmed. Cleveland Metro Parks, the guys there, the biologists there. If you start getting on Google and start looking for this, most of the description of this comes from there. We know it's in New York, right? We found it just recently in Connecticut, right? So we got to kind of go to this slide here. It's in Connecticut, the Connecticut Agricultural Extension Service, or Ag Experiment Station, found it. So I, noticed that it's all around us, and so it's likely that we're going to see it in New Jersey. The native range of beech, something like this. So again, it's one of these things. It seems like every year we've got another thing that's going to kill another type of tree. It's a shame, kind of. It's a difficult thing to deal with. So native range, and you can have significant impact on forested areas because of this. And so the nematode looks like this. So nematodes, if you don't know what nematodes are unsegmented roundworms. There's more than 500,000 species of nematodes. Most of them are free of parasitic associations. Some of them are parasites of animals and plants. Heartworms and dogs are nematodes, right? So you guys are familiar. Everyone has a dog, feeds their dog heartworm, or we hope you do, because of the heartworms, right? We work with nematodes in the soil, in turf grass, and in fruits and vegetables. They feed on the roots, and they cause a dysfunctional root system, causes yield loss and decline of plants, and that sort of thing. There's foliar nematodes in things like onions and garlic. We see them in some perennials and that sort of stuff. Even something like Buckley will have them. We have nematodes that cause pine wilt disease, which was what we thought was an invasive in the 1980s, that turned out to be an endemic species of foliar nematode that we actually imported to Japan, right? So, or exported to Japan. And I always like to think of it, that's our answer to the Japanese beetle, we can trade, right? And so this is what it is. This is out of paper. Like anyone's ever going to ID one of these things. And so what we'll do in our lab is when we get the leaves, I'm just going to just shred them in a dish of water, and I'll look for the nematodes swimming out. They're generally microscopic. I need about 200 power to see them. And if I have a beech leaf and I have nematodes in the dish, I don't need to identify it. I'm pretty confident that it's the one I'm looking at, right? And so these things get in the leaves, and so when the leaves are expanding at bud break, you start to see these dark bands, and they appear on infested leaves, right? And they stay through the season. As the season progresses, they start to get raised a little bit, right? And so, the leaves are crinkling up, crinkly. I wasn't sure if you spelled that with a K or a C when I made this slide. And so the dark areas are raised, and then as the season progresses, the leaves start to shrink and to twist up. Now, you can get on websites and just do like beech leaf diseases and see anthracnose and see powdery mildew and see woolly aphids and see things like arid mites and stuff that all kind of make raised and crinkly and shrunken leaves, right? So proper diagnosis is important here. You really want to see we back up, you see those bands, in between the veins. If you're seeing that early in the season, that I think that's a good diagnostic characteristic. Certainly you want to rule out everything else. Now, it doesn't cause the trees to lose leaves, but the buds will start to be killed. And in subsequent seasons, the canopy starts to thin, right? So you can see here, this is a photo from up in Cleveland, that the foliage in the canopy has thinned pretty dramatically. This came out of a paper where they were measuring light intensity, and they were measuring in uninfested areas and then in infested areas, and there was a dramatic increase in light intensity because of the loss of the foliage, right? Obviously, right? And so over time, the trees will make less and less foliage, and then ultimately they'll die. We're seeing them die from this. You can tell picking up leaves off the ground. Again, you can still see the bands here. So this is something new, something that I would expect to see here in New Jersey sooner or later. It's something that we're not really sure of the cause. It's looking like it's a nematode, but just because we found the nematode in the tree doesn't mean that's the cause, right? We still have to go through a whole bunch of work infecting trees with the nematode and watching the life cycle. So the research here is early, and there's a lot that has to be ascertained before we can make any kinds of recommendations. So what I wanted to do here is just say that, help us. If you see it, call somebody. Call somebody that works for the state. I'd like to see it if you have it. So then we can start to get our own folks working on it and that sort of thing. Again, it's something new. It's a disease, and it's beech, so it's another of one of our hardwoods in native in New Jersey. It's problematic. We also have this disease, beech bark disease, and so this is an interesting critter. It's a relationship between tree and a scale, right? A felt scale, and a fungus, an opportunistic fungus that moves in. Everybody heard me talk before for your LTE or CTE. Heard me talk about nectar canker or something. Everybody knows what nectar canker is generally. This one is a different subspecies, a little more aggressive grower, I think, than the whole other one. The other one I would say needs to have stress or some sort of injury. This one needs to scale there first before it comes in. You'll find nectaria on beech trees in the absence of the scale. It's a different nectaria, right? So that's something to keep in mind too. And so what happens here is the scale comes first, and so it's been moving. You see it's in North Jersey. It's moving down into Pennsylvania, and the scale comes first, right? So these guys, Cryptococcus Phagasuga. Is that how you say it? It's a small yellow scale. It doesn't make wax like the hard scales do. You know, like you'd see from a oyster shell scale or a pernicola scale or something. It makes wool, like a woolly aphid or a woolly adelgid. And when I first encountered it, you know, that's what I thought it was. I didn't realize that there was a family of scale that makes wool, you know, and so they call them felt scales. So these things are quite abundant. The females settle and are degenerate, and they don't have wings or legs, and they cover themselves with wax, lay a bunch of eggs. And these things move into forested areas, and then there's a great abundance of them. You know, they don't have to have sex to lay eggs. You know, they're parthenogenic, and so one turns into a whole bunch, and then you have trees that look like they're covered in wool, white woolly wax, right? So you have that, right? And so that's phase one. And so these trees are being fed on by, you know, a small. Oh no, it's you. Go ahead. No, we don't. We rarely ever see it. So I still consider this a forest thing, and I'm still kind of thinking it's invasive because there's not a bunch of it. At least in my experience, there's not a bunch of it. You guys are seeing it in the woods. Someone should tell me, right? And the folks in Pennsylvania, you know, see it a lot. And the urban arborists that I do a program there called the Pest pool section. Those guys are worried about it coming down toward the Philadelphia area, into the expensive suburbs, put it that way. Yeah. There's no sign of it. Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear. Right. So you know, again, something for you guys to pay attention to. And so once the insects come in, then the fungus gets in there and starts making cankers. Right. And the Nectaria, it makes a classic orange or reddish colored Sporodokia. You know, you take sections and you can see the dead wood underneath. The perithecia form. It's a sexual reproductive structure that'll form in the same wounds. And you know, the Nectaria generally is a slower growing fungus. The trees compartmentalize some of the species pretty well. It's not going to grow that fast, right? The tree's going to lay down some callus and fight back a little bit. But then what happens is you get secondary fungi over top of the Nectaria, and then now we have trees that have they're weakened by the scale. They have branches with Nectaria. We got some wood rotting fungi on top, and they start getting wind blown, and they break off, and you start losing a lot of plant material in the wooded areas. Right, the saplings that might come up from the roots are subsequently infected, and you know, perpetuates itself there in that area. So what do we do, right? You know, if I'm talking about Nectaria, I'm talking about, you know, sound culture and stuff. That doesn't apply to a wooded area. You know, in a landscape, we might not see this because maybe we have overall healthier trees. Maybe, you know, I'm saying maybe because you stick one in somebody's yard, that's a stress just in its own right? But they might be more likely to get the adequate irrigation and be pruned effectively, and maybe even get some kind of fertility. You know, so you know, stress is part of it. You know, avoiding the injuries and drought and that sort of stuff, and then remove the affected plant material. We would cut down these trees and deal with them. You know, on site. We don't have quarantine for this. But again, you know, if you're cutting down a tree and you think you have beech bark disease, you know, it's probably a good idea not to spread it. You know, and just think it'd be mindful of what you're handling. As far as the scale is concerned, you know, again, these aren't necessarily recommendations for forested areas. You know, in the landscape, it's pretty easy to control these things if you start to monitor for the egg hatch. You know, you can use oils for small populations. on heavier populations, systemic materials, and you know, a treatment with dinoteffuran, a bark spray with dinoteffuran is a pretty darn good scale control, right? That's a really effective material that takes away some of the effort to time it. Now, if you're going to use something else, what you need to do is look for the crawlers or the egg hats. So you watch the populations and you keep coming back and you'll find eggs in the woolly ovisacs. And eventually you're going to find individuals crawling away, early instars. And when you see the babies, at that point, if you use a insect growth regulator like Talus or Distance, and you mix it into a 1% oil solution, stick it to the bark, right, you get a real good control that way. You know, using a less toxic maybe material. You know, if you're into it, you can also spray whatever you got in the shed. You know, you notice that you got 7 and all the pyrethroids and that sort of stuff there too. That'll kill them too. It's all about timing. Timing helps. When you got the crawlers, timing is going to give you a higher kill rate than if you try some other time. Somebody yelling in another room. And, all right. So it's wow, 2:05. So I got time to do one more. I got 10 minutes. Oh, that's good. That's good. You know, it's funny because after this, I put Southern Pine Beetle. And that's like a half hour long. So I better take 10 minutes for this one, right? So, you didn't know. You got to be prepared for anything. All right, so here's Japanese cedar longhorn beetles. These are interesting insects. And I threw it in here because we're seeing a lot more of these in the lab. We see these in the lab a lot now. And they're cerambycids. You know, everybody's familiar with longhorn beetles because of the Asian longhorn beetle, right? This is a much smaller insect. It was first identified by the Connecticut Ag Experiment Station quite some time ago. It likes plants in the Cupressaceae. We see it mostly in arborvitaes, right? You know, arborvitaes are like the bane of my existence. I hate arborvitaes. And it's interesting because I'll call up Sabrina and I'll say, Sabrina, we got anything in the lab? And she's like, we got the normal arborvitae twigs, right? And every day we get arborvitae twigs. You know, every day I get a boxwood sample. You know, so it's so I know what plants I'll never plant, right? And so these things come in, and so we have a small area where they have been detected and confirmed, and note that it's New Jersey and Connecticut, right? Now you have to take this kind of stuff with a grain of salt, these NJAES maps. You know, they're pretty easy to find. And so what happens is we got trap catches and stuff. And like for instance, I'm working with Saul at the State Department of Ag, and we have cooperative agriculture pest survey traps in the lab. I think we have about 1,200 traps sitting there that eventually Sabrina and I are going to have to go and look at them all. Right, we're going to have to look at them all, and that's going to generate a giant data set, right? And that data set we'll give to the State Department of Ag guys, but maybe there's nobody at the State Department of Ag that can take the time to put it into the NJAES database, right? We have to enter our data into a database of diagnostic labs, and I just hired a kid to start working on data from 2 years ago, right? So she's catching us up, but so that's what I'm saying here. The data might not go into the database until they got somebody to put it in, right? So you look at these maps, and they might not be entirely accurate, right? It gives you an idea of where they are, you know, but it's not 100% foolproof. But note that we have them here in our area. And so these things lay eggs on the bark, and so they lay eggs on the bark, and the eggs hatch, and the larvae chews into the bark. And you can see where they chew in the entry holes, often bleeding. You know, we're in a conifer, and you have, you know, I don't want to call them pitch tubes, but you see sap dripping down the stem. This cryptomeria came out of landscape at Princeton, and so you know we cut the bark away, and we find the larvae, right? And so you know, longhorn beetles are round-headed borers, and the first thoracic segment, see the little head on the top? Of course, this doesn't hit there, it goes away, right? The head's that little tiny thing on the top, and then you have the first three thoracic segments, and the first one's swollen, right? We're talking about MI board, we're talking about it flat, like flat-headed board, right? And so this is a longhorn beetle and a round-headed board. And so these things bore in the cambium, right? And then turn into the hardwood. Of course, in an arborvitae, there's not that much of a stem, so they spend a lot more time in the cambium. They do eventually move in a little bit. So you very often, along with the sap production, you see some cracking and that sort of thing. And so again, you cut the bark away, and you see as they pass through their instars, the boring chambers get a little bit larger, and ultimately they turn in, right? And when they turn in, they plug up the hole behind them as a way to keep predators out. Predators will come in and follow the chamber and get them, right? And so they plug it up, and that allows them a little safety. You see branches, you cut cross section, you see them in there. Sometimes these get wind thrown. They go over the winter as a larvae, they pupate in the spring, and then the adult chews its way out through an oval or a round exit hole. And then what we get is arborvitaes that look like this. And all the arborvitaes I see everywhere look like this. The deer didn't eat them, they're brown, you know, and you guys keep planting arborvitaes, man. You want that like green fence. And then they all die, and they bring them to me. And so look, be careful when you see that, because something like that, I would want you to bring me the whole tree, because I want to look at the roots. I want to look at the whole thing. So take a close look at them, because you may have these beetles in there. We're seeing more and more of them. Now, another thing I want to tell you, this is not an invasive, but this is something that we're starting to see in more and more samples of Leyland cypress and arborvitae, are these bark beetles, the cedar bark beetle. And so again, cut the bark away. You know, it might not be dead just because it's an arborvitae. It might actually have a problem. And you see, somebody thinks I'm funny. And I hate those trees. But without them, I might not have a job, man. So many of them die, right? And so look for these guys in there too. And so what we're going to do, right? We're going to keep them healthy. One of the things that I find with arborvitae is the dude who's growing them, whoever's growing them, has like 10,000 of them, and he's only got like one tree spade. So no matter what size they are, it's got the same size root ball, and it's usually small, right? And so you got these little root, like an 8-foot tree, and you got a basketball down here, and your client plants 50 of them. I remember she planted 50 of them, and like 15 of them died. And I was like, oh, you did good. And she cussed at me and hung up the phone. And but you know, so they don't establish. You know, they suffer in the winter. They suffer in the heat. They get all kind of tip blights and mites and bagworms and just all kind. I probably could do an hour talk on arborvitaes. But again, you know, if you can get the right tree with a decent sized root ball and plant it appropriately, and don't mulch it too much, and don't water it too much, and take all the burlap, and you know, all those things that Jason will try to teach you how to do, right? If you do all that stuff right, then you're likely not to get these things. If you have some insult, right, you're lucky. You know, these insects will move into the stressed trees, right? I think that's an important thing. Now we do see them in more healthier trees, but I think stress plays a role with all borers, right? So mitigate that. Remove the infested trees and take them off the site and burn them or remove them. Dispose of them appropriately. If you want to spray insecticides, right? Begin when the insects appear and at 6-week intervals, and you're likely with that sort of a recommendation to be using one of the pyrethroids, you know, permethrin pro or onyx or something. Using Safari dinoteffuran as a trunk spray might be effective as well. But again, it's only an arborvitae, and you go to Home Depot and get a new one for like $9.95. So just yank it out, buy a new one, and kill it too. And so, yeah, thank you very much.